All right, so today we're gonna dive into something that's been in the news quite a bit lately, and that is Russell Brand's take on his marriage to Katy Perry.
Yeah.
Um, it's a relationship that just seems to keep coming up years later.
Yeah.
It's like people are still kind of fascinated by it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the comedian and presenter marrying a huge global pop star, there's always going to be a lot of attention on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those pairings that, right from the start that it's going to be under a microscope. And the fact that Brand has, decided to talk about it again on his podcast, Stay Free with Russell Brand, well, it's definitely sparked a lot of new interest.
For sure. And I think what we're going to try and do today is look beyond just, the headlines and the clickbait,
Yeah.
really try and unpack,
Yeah.
what he's saying now,
Yeah.
what he said back then.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually quite a bit to work with. There's his podcast, there's old interviews from both of them, and of course, all the news reports from back when they were together.
Yeah.
So we're going to use all that to try and piece together what was going on in this very, very public relationship.
Yeah. I think that's key, because there's so many different angles to look at it from.
Totally. And I think a good place to start is with his recent comments on his podcast.
Okay.
One thing that really jumped out was when he called Perry not entirely normal,
Yeah.
but then he immediately kind of clarified that.
Right.
He said he meant that because of her extraordinary fame, not that she was weird or off-key or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
When you first heard that, what was your take on it?
Well, I thought it was interesting how he immediately, qualified that statement about her not being normal. It's like he's acknowledging that her life is obviously very unusual because of the level of fame she has, but he also seems to be trying to, set this baseline of normalcy for their relationship as a whole.
Yeah.
It almost makes you wonder if he's trying to preempt anyone from assuming that, they broke up because they were just fundamentally incompatible, like
Right.
the personalities clashed or something.
Right. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's a subtle thing, but it definitely stands out when you listen to how he phrases it.
Yeah. And then he goes on to say that their divorce was down to normal human reasons marriages don't work.
Right.
And he made it very clear that he has nothing but respect for her.
Yeah, he did.
It does kind of feel like he's trying to, rewrite the narrative a little bit.
It does, especially when you remember how things ended, not exactly amicably from what we've heard.
Yeah, exactly. Like that whole text message thing. We'll get to that.
Right. Yeah.
But just focusing on what he said now,
Yeah.
the phrase normal human reasons is pretty broad.
It is. It really doesn't give you a lot to go on.
Right. Like it could mean anything.
Exactly. But I do think it's a shift from, some of the more dramatic explanations that maybe were floating around back then.
Oh, for sure.
And the fact that he specifically mentions respect, that feels significant.
It does.
It suggests that, there's some distance from the, the immediate aftermath of their split.
Yeah.
Maybe there's been some, personal growth, some reflection. Enough
Yeah.
time has passed that he can look back with, a more mature perspective.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
And he also brought up political disagreements.
Oh, yeah.
He said he disagreed with her on some things, but, that's normal in any relationship. He even said it happens in his current marriage.
Interesting.
It almost feels like he's trying to say, look, these challenges weren't unique to us. This is just everyday relationship stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it by bringing up his current relationship. It's almost like he's trying to normalize these differences of opinion. Is it saying that they're just a common feature of any partnership?
Yeah.
And by doing that, it makes you think about, how much those disagreements actually played a role back then versus how much weight we might have given them or how they might be, perceived looking back.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about what he's saying now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to really understand this, we need to go back to the beginning.
Okay, yeah, let's rewind.
Because it was quite the whirlwind romance, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, what?
Officially, they met at the MTV Video Music Awards in 2009.
Right.
But there was that earlier, almost accidental meeting during a cutscene for Get Him to the Greek.
Oh, yeah. I'd forgotten about that.
It's one of those little details that makes you go, maybe fate had a hand in this.
It does, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe they were just meant to cross paths.
Yeah, maybe it was meant to be.
Yeah.
So you have that brief encounter, then the VMAs happen.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, boom, they're off to the races.
It's true. When you look back, it's amazing how quickly things escalated after they officially got together.
Right. It wasn't like they dated for years. It was just bam.
Yeah, no kidding.
They were engaged within months by January 2010 after that trip to India.
Yep.
And then the wedding itself in October 2010.
Oh, man, the wedding.
It was insane. incredibly lavish Hindu ceremony in Rajasthan.
Hmm.
It cost something like over 1.5 million. They had it at a tiger sanctuary.
It was wild. It was like straight out of a movie.
It really was. And it just, solidified this image of them as this grand, almost fairy tale romance.
Right. It was like a spectacle for the whole world to see.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so interesting about a lot of celebrity relationships.
Yeah.
You have this very carefully constructed public image, this fairy tale, if you will.
Uh-huh.
But how often does that actually match up with the reality?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? What's going on behind closed doors?
And in their case, that divergence between the image and the reality became pretty apparent pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Just 14 months after that huge public wedding,
Yeah.
Brand filed for divorce,
Wow.
citing irreconcilable differences. And he even released a statement saying that he would always adore her and that he hoped they'd stay friends.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that sentiment clearly didn't last.
Yeah, not from what we know now.
Right.
Perry actually revealed in a 2013 Vogue interview that he told her about the divorce via text message on New Year's Eve, no less.
Ouch.
Right. You can't make that up.
It's brutal. And it just goes to show you, right, like his public statements versus her actual experience.
Yeah.
Totally different stories. And I think that really highlights how complex these celebrity breakups can be.
Oh, absolutely. There are so many layers to it. And often you have these completely conflicting narratives coming out. And it makes you think, what was the real communication like behind the scenes?
Yeah, what was actually going on?
Right. Because what we see in the media is just the tip of the iceberg.
And I think Perry's perspective in that Vogue interview was really interesting.
Uh-huh.
She kind of hinted at what she thought went wrong.
Yeah.
She suggested that Brand had a hard time with her level of fame.
Okay.
And with her being, the boss on tour,
right.
She felt like at first he wanted an equal partnership, but as she became more and more successful, it became an issue.
Interesting.
And that just makes you think about the power dynamics in that relationship.
It does, right? Like, were things really equal?
And how could they be, with the level of fame she had?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The very thing that might have drawn them together in the first place, her success, her public persona.
Right.
Could have ended up being a source of tension.
Makes sense. And, it happens in regular relationships, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
When one partner's career takes off, it can put a strain on things.
Absolutely. It can change the whole dynamic.
Yeah, and Brand actually touched on this himself, although maybe in a more general sense.
Yep.
During his 2023 appearance on Running Wild with Bear Grylls.
Oh, right. I remember that.
He described their relationship as being in the eye of a cyclone because of Perry's fame.
Wow.
He said he felt a little bit chaotic and a bit disconnected.
That's powerful imagery.
It is. He did still refer to her as an amazing person, though.
Okay, so there's still some respect there.
Yeah, definitely. But it's interesting, right? Like, they both acknowledge how intense the pressure was.
They do, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, tabloid gossip. This was a real thing they were dealing with.
Absolutely. And Brand's feeling of being disconnected.
Yeah.
That could definitely line up with what Perry was saying.
Yeah, about him struggling with her success and the power that came with it.
Right. It's like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and it just raises the question, how much did that external cyclone contribute to their internal disconnect?
Totally. Okay, so we have Brand's side of things and Perry's comments in Vogue.
Mm-hmm.
But she also talked about the divorce in a 2014 Rolling Stone interview.
Oh, yeah.
And she called it the death of a dream.
Wow.
She said she felt like she was living in fairy tale land. But the reality was so different.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. It really speaks to the impact of expectations.
Yeah, how we build things up in our minds.
Exactly. And especially with celebrity couples.
Right.
There's this huge public narrative, this fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
And then reality comes crashing in.
It's like the double bursts.
Yeah. And it's clear that Perry really felt that.
She did. It seems like the divorce was a huge personal disappointment for her.
Oh, yeah. Despite how it might have looked from the outside.
Right behind all the glitz and glamour, there was real emotional pain.
For sure. And then a few years later, in 2020, she was on 60 Minutes Australia.
Okay.
And she described their time together as like a tornado.
Interesting.
She also said that she's always resonated with friction and resistance and challenges.
Wow. That's a pretty revealing statement.
It is. It's almost like she's saying that some level of instability was normal for her.
Yeah, like she was almost drawn to it.
Right, like maybe it was even something she sought out in relationships.
It's fascinating, right? It gives you a whole new perspective on their dynamic.
It does. Okay, so we've talked about the relationship, how it started, how it ended.
Uh-huh.
But it's important to acknowledge where they both are now.
Yes, definitely.
Perry is engaged to Orlando Bloom. They have a daughter together.
Right.
And Brand has remarried to Laura Gallagher, and he has children as well.
It seems like they both moved on.
They have, and it's interesting how they've both spoken pretty positively about each other in recent years.
Yeah, despite how messy things were initially.
Right. It suggests that there's been some growth, some healing.
Yeah, maybe some forgiveness, too.
And it's great that they've both found happiness.
It is. It shows you that, people can move on from difficult experiences.
They can, and build new lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, we can't ignore the current context.
Right.
The recent charges against Brand.
Yeah.
For multiple sexual offenses dating back quite a few years.
Very serious allegations.
They are, and he denies them.
He does.
But it's understandable that these allegations have people looking back at his past relationships.
Absolutely.
Including his marriage to Perry.
Yeah, it's all part of this larger conversation now.
Right, and, the timeline of their relationship, just over 2 years from meeting to separation.
Wow, that's pretty short.
It is, and it just becomes another piece of the puzzle.
Right, as people try to make sense of everything.
Exactly. Okay, so to kind of bring it all back around.
Yeah.
Brand's recent comments about his marriage to Katy Perry, they're clearly part of a longer and much more complex story.
They are. There are so many layers to it.
Right, and he's choosing to emphasize the normal human reasons for their split.
Yeah, while still acknowledging the respect he has for her.
Right, even though their time together was short and pretty turbulent.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a smooth ride.
It wasn't. All right, so for everyone listening to DRM News Global, let's recap.
Okay.
Russell Brand recently talked about his marriage to Katy Perry. He framed it as ending for normal human reasons. And he also said he respects her.
Right.
We talked about how their relationship was this huge whirlwind romance.
Yeah.
The lavish wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and then the pretty quick divorce.
Yeah.
We also looked at, both of their perspectives on why it ended.
Mm-hmm.
Perry suggested that Brand had some issues with her level of fame. And Brand talked about the craziness and the chaos of their lives.
Right, the eye of the cyclone.
Exactly. And we also touched on where they are now, both happily remarried with children. And, of course, the recent allegations against Brand, which have kind of brought all this back into the spotlight.
Right, it's put everything in a new light.
For sure. So what are your final thoughts?
Well, I think what's really interesting is this idea that even in a relationship as high profile as theirs, the reasons for it ending might not have been all that unique.
Yeah.
But we also have to acknowledge that the pressure of fame and, the fact that people change and grow over time,
Right.
that definitely amplified things for them.
Absolutely. And it makes you think,
Yeah.
how do those external pressures and that personal growth, how do those things affect any relationship?
Right. Are any of us immune to that?
Whether you're in the public eye or not.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that's a great question for everyone listening to consider.
Yeah, it is. So for everyone out there, what do you think? What parts of a relationship are strong enough to survive those external forces, that eye of the cyclone?
Yeah. That's a good one to ponder.
It is something to think about.
All right.
That's going to do it for us here on DRM News Global. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.